and welcome back to the Wellness on Purpose podcast. If you're new to our podcast page, our intention here is to provide you with impactful, educational, and realistic information to help you progress on your journey to live wellness on purpose now and for future generations. My name is Marissa Laughlin. I am a registered holistic nutritionist and your host for this podcast. For the month of April, we are prioritizing our earth, which means we are highlighting different impactful topics that can help to support our earth in the whole, as well as our ecosystem, our individual communities, and ourselves. So over the next few weeks, we are going to be releasing a sustainability series where we talk about certified organic foods versus conventional foods. We're going to talk about sustainably sourced foods and products, as well as the truth behind reduce, reuse, recycle, and composting within our community. I could not bring you this amazing series without three other incredible Joanne's Place employees, which I am so excited to have on our podcast to explore these topics with you. So without further ado, let me introduce these amazing guests so you can get familiar with whose voice is who for the next couple episodes on this podcast.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Caravan, and I'm a certified nutritional practitioner at Joanne's Place and supervisor of the 76 Sips Cafe.
Hi, I'm Sarah Smink, and I'm the purchasing manager as well as the primary food buyer for Joanne's Place.
Hey, it's Heather Tate. I am the operations manager and people coordinator for Joanne's Place and 76 Sips Cafe, and I would say I'm a self-proclaimed sustainability guru.
Morning, ladies. Thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast to bring our listeners our sustainability series. We're going to be talking specifically today about certified organic foods, as well as other common certifications such as non-GMO verified, certified fair trade, and B corporations. Now, before we dive into all the nitty-gritty details in terms of what those certifications mean, I want to start off by saying that this podcast episode is strictly for educational purposes and what we've experienced in this industry as professionals and in working in a health food store. We obviously get immense amount of questions in terms of the legitimacy around certified products, and we want to bring that information forward so that we can give you the tools to make the right decisions based on the information that you have. So something that we pride ourselves on at Joanne's Place is making sure that the products that we have on the shelf are safe for you. We always do the work in terms of looking at where companies are sourcing their ingredients from, different certifications that they have on their products, what's relevant, what's sustainable, what might be trending in one area, but people are really trying to jump on the bandwagon, might actually be very detrimental to our economy as well. So we're going to be really exploring those detailed questions because we choose the products at Joanne's Place based on a criteria. We don't just bring in any and every single health food product available because we want to make sure that decisions that we put in front of you are going to actually support your health journey in a positive way. So as I mentioned, today we're talking about certifications, and I want to dive right in and start to talk about certified organic. So Sarah, can you tell us what certified organic actually means when it's on a product?
So there's governing bodies that will visit farms that have a list of expectations, requirements that are necessary to meet. And some of the biggest things would be certified organic, meaning no pesticide use, herbicide use, the chemicals that you hear people talk about sometimes in the media and whatnot, not allowed. Also, there is soil specifications, meaning what can be put into the soil, how crops are rotated. Often conventional farming, they'll grow, for example, rice continually over and over and over again in the same patch of field, and that would
Deplete the soil, yeah.
That's deplete the soil of nutrients that our body needs, minerals and things like that, as well as the farming practices itself. So certified organic farming looks at not only the health of what they're growing, but the soil, the animals around them, the birds in the air, and also how the animals are treated. So the goal of certified organic farming would be to give you the healthiest possible product, meaning healthy animals, healthy soil, healthy environment.
So really essentially from start to finish in terms of like how the soil is supported and, you know, nourished all the way to the very end before it's even packaged. There is a full protocol that a company must follow for it to be certified organic.
Absolutely.
So there are many different certifying bodies for organic. Can you talk a little bit about what those are?
So in Canada, we have a couple main ones. You girls may know other ones like ProCert, EcoCert. I know Quebec has some of their own certifying bodies. You still will see USDA certified in Canada. That is a United States certifying body. They do differ somewhat between the US and Canada in our favor, really.
Yeah, we have higher standards.
We have higher standards. We have stricter protocols, and often those protocols are changing year to year. I actually went to a webinar this year where they were talking about some of the changes they'd like to make in favor of certified organic farming, even into a more biodiverse practices, which is, as we're talking about sustainability, even more so sustainable. So definitely in Canada, that is a lot of conversation around that on a regular basis, but those are the main ones.
And all of these certifications cost the company money in order to put this certification on their product, correct?
Yes. So there's a lot that would go into a farm converting from conventional to or certified organic. There'd be a transition period that's required, 3 years, I believe, where you have to have these practices in place, but you're not selling your produce or your dairy or your meat, whatever that may be, as certified organic. So there's definitely a cost to the farmer, but the yield is much higher. I mean, obviously, one of the things people will talk about is the price difference between conventional foods and organic. Well, that would be some of the reason why, as to the cost that would go into producing the yield. However, as more and more people buy it, we're seeing that margin is shrinking for sure in the difference. And it's quite interesting to see that if you really pay attention to what you're buying and the price, that you would be surprised.
Absolutely. I feel like years ago when I first became a nutritionist, that was like one of the things you learned about was organic versus conventional food. And that was the biggest problem that people really spoke to was the cost. But when we as consumers are putting our dollars where we want to see progress be made, we are the people that are making that happen. So that price come down, more companies are becoming aware that consumers want to buy those products, and you know, they're finding ways in which they can meet the demands of the consumers. So, you know, you're even going to see big companies that are starting to put out organic products or cleaner products and cleaner ingredients, and it's because as consumers we hold the power in which where these companies go. Obviously, if there's a higher demand for organic meat or organic produce, they're going to have to meet it somehow, and that's really where we need to be mindful of is we have the opportunity to make that shift happen, but we have to do it intentionally for sure.
I think the cool part too is the fact that even looking back to organic like 4 or 5 years ago, the price drop from then to now is quite a good change. So if we keep going on that scale, we're getting closer to that conventional price point as it is. So yeah, you're right. We just got to keep pushing for what we believe in that aspect, and they're listening. So that's what's beneficial about it too.
Absolutely. And I think too, I know for myself with health conditions, when people always come at us kind of and talk about pricing and how, you know, it's higher, what we need to also consider is where in our budget are we spending that money the most. Like for me, it's non-negotiable for food. That's just one thing for me. There are many other areas in my budget where I'm willing to lower so that I can make this, you know, a priority for me because it matters to me. So I think that's another thing that people need to open that conversation for is where are you spending most of your budget on, and is it actually, you know, supporting your health if you do have health concerns, or you're prioritizing your health. It comes down to that as well too.
Well, and then it comes to cost long term, right? So if you're spending money on organic produce that, you know, isn't disrupting your hormones and things like that, you're less likely to have those effects later on down in your life when you're going to have to spend more money on medication or supplements. And I think one of the things that we kind of gear towards is forgetting about being preventative, and we treat afterwards. So when we think about organic, what we're doing is we're being preventative and taking care of ourselves for the long-term goal, which ends up being health and saving money in the long term. So it's one of those things that we kind of get lost in the individual price, looking at it on the shelf, but then when you look at prospectively throughout the life, you're actually going to save yourself some money and stress, because you're not going to be putting your body through that too.
And looking forward even to like next generations, not just in terms of, what you put into your body is going to impact the health of your children, but farming practices that we use now are going to impact the health of our soil, which also is going to impact the health of our future generations. So I think what's really neat is that these organic farms sort of go back to basics with their farming practices, using they still use certain herbicides and pesticides, but they do it in a very different way. So they're maybe more naturally derived, herbal derived. They do things like introduce beneficial insect companion planting, crop rotation, that kind of thing. So not just thinking about your future health, but thinking about the health of future generations in terms of, are they going to be able to farm on the same land that we're farming on right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that actually goes into a really good point. We can all put our point of view on here. So the reason that we have a variety of people on this podcast episode is because we are all in different stages of our lives, and we all, have different priorities. But in terms of why we choose to buy organic, let's maybe dive a little bit deeper into that. So I'll start, and as a nutritionist and as a professional, I'm definitely recommending organic produce if it's, available in people's budget. But what I've seen on a personal level that's been eye-opening for me is organic meat. Like that is definitely where I would spend most of my money on, would be organic meat. But I've noticed such a difference personally in terms of hormones and regulating my cycle and reducing the amount of hormones and pesticides putting into my body. I've noticed such a big difference, and in a lot of research I've done, this has also been really important if anyone is struggling with infertility. It's like one area that people should be looking at is organic meat, because the amount of hormones and synthetic hormones that are pumped in conventional meat is unbelievable, and people may not even know that actually happens, but it does, and that's how they get the supply and demand met. And unfortunately, it's compromising our own health. Mm-hmm. So that's my biggest shift in terms of switching from conventional to organic was meat.
That's a big one for me too, and I really try to prioritize when I'm choosing to have meat is choosing organic meat, local ideally as well, but also introducing more vegan meals sort of in my weekly meal cycle. So doing a little bit of a balance of both I found is the most financially feasible for me. Choosing organic produce for me, when you become a nutritionist, I'm sure Marissa you can understand there's certain things, or just working in the health industry, you can't unlearn things. Once you know, and you can't get it out of your head. And I know that my liver is constantly working so hard to synthesize my hormones. And I also know that if I'm introducing pesticides or environmental estrogens, my liver is going to prioritize processing them over my hormones. And I know that I'm really going to see a detrimental impact on that. So getting into things like that, it makes it almost impossible for me to choose non-organic, and trusting in Canada's organic certification body really helps me have peace of mind about what I'm eating.
For me, I'd say it was probably when I first started way back going into this kind of lifestyle, it would be the sustainability aspect for sure. Looking at the practices like we were talking about earlier, just how it affects the soil, affects the animals and the environment, and wanting to save that for future generations and provide them the best opportunity to be successful themselves. That was my big push for organic, was the standards and the ethics behind it. And then when you dive into it more, like you said, Rebecca, you can't unlearn what you learn. And the nutritional benefits and the lifestyle benefits that you get from going organic and choosing organic is astronomical. And like you're again too, so like the hormones and dealing with that, like it's a big change. It's one of those things that you don't realize how unhealthy you are until you start going healthy, and then you start eating organic and you're like, wow, my body feels so much different eating this way compared to the same broccoli that I was eating that was conventional, but for some reason I have more energy and I'm not going through as much stomach aches or whatever the case may be, but it's part of the process and the chemicals and everything else that gets put through it. So yeah, it's kind of a forward world cycle for me. We've ended up here, but I don't think it's gonna stop.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, for me, it's a little bit different approach than these beautiful ladies here, given that I also have 2 growing daughters in my household. So I did grow up in this industry, so I have always been mindful of the foods that I eat and the choices that I'm making. So for me personally, that has always been a factor. And then getting married to someone who has a lot of health issues, and then having 2 daughters that carry some of those same allergies that my husband has, it made us look at how we eat very intentionally. So wherever possible in our budget, we will spend money on food. I remember someone saying that to me once. If they looked at your bank account, what would they see that you value? And it would be very good quality food. That's what we value. That is, for our family, a choice that we make to put a lot of money into the foods that we eat, because of all the reasons that these girls said also, but for as well, with especially with children, or chemical pesticides and herbicides bioaccumulate in the body. So for me, it is very important that wherever possible, my children are consuming certified organic, even if that means that I do not. Obviously, we all have budgets, and we have to fit our purchases into those budgets. But they are first and foremost. We're always, I know Marissa touched on this, and so did Rebecca, anything that comes from an animal in our household will be certified organic. That's very important because of the hormone usage. Having 2 daughters, and even if you have sons, very important. The being mindful of the hormones that they could be ingesting if they're eating these types of foods, and also produce, because a large quantity of our diet is produce. We eat primarily paleo diet. For those of you that know what that is, for those of you who don't, it is fairly large amounts of meat and produce, and that would be for my husband's health issues, as he has an autoimmune disorder. So it is very important that the foods that go into our bodies are as clean as possible. And really, if it was just me, sometimes I wonder, but when I believe that it's my job to set my children's health up for their future, that it's my responsibility to ensure that they are having the very best start in life, and I take that very seriously.
And I think, I don't have kids for myself, but I think that, if you're a mom right now and you're listening, first off, let's say there's no guilt around if you are not feeding your children organic, because we understand that isn't always accessible for everybody. But it's just something to be mindful of what could you be doing better in just small areas of your life. Maybe it's even just starting with less processed food and moving more towards more fresh food. Like that could even just be step 1. And then from there, you look at specifically the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. So if you guys aren't familiar with those, we're going to link those below so you can actually click through and see. But there are specific foods that are highly sprayed with pesticides and herbicides compared to other fruits and vegetables, and that is solely for the purpose of being traveled for a longer distance, being grown faster, or if they're grown in more harsher conditions so that they can withstand those conditions. So an example would be like strawberries. They're so delicate that they don't grow as quickly as some others, and they don't stay fresh as long. So they want to prolong that life of the strawberry as long as they can for the consumer to buy. So they are very heavily sprayed with pesticides and herbicides. And then there's other things like spinach, leafy greens. They, like I said, they're more delicate, so they're going to be sprayed more so that they are, have a longer shelf life essentially for you to consume. But as we said, what's great and what we're seeing is these organic prices are coming down to meet the consumer demand. So we hope that continues to happen, and I think it will. I think people are really mindful of the additional things they put into their body besides just having celery or just having cucumbers. There's more than just that being added in, and people are being mindful of that. So yeah, I think it's great.
If I could just say one extra thing too, Marissa, just what you're talking about with price points coming down, that as Marissa said, no guilt in the choices that you make. You have to do the best that you can with what you have, and we all know that. But I would, just try swapping out one thing and just seeing what it's like. For example, cheese. If you just do a little test at home, buy a block of organic cheese and try it versus the same block of cheese from a conventional brand, the taste, night and day different.
Yeah.
So you find that you need less of some of these certified organic products because the flavor profile is so much higher. So you may need less of something, therefore you're consuming less, therefore the cost actually gets less, like the cost difference gets less. So, just a little something to try, right?
Actually,
if you're, trying to change some of these things in your lifestyle. Just test for yourself, right? And just see those differences.
Which brings me to a really good point that we've talked about before in office, was about needing less, because the nutritional profile on organic food is substantially different than conventional food. It's almost twice as much, correct?
Yeah, I remember reading an article that said, like, consuming certified organic produce would be like having an extra serving, right? So if you need 10 to 12 servings a day, and all of that produce happens to be certified organic, how much more you're getting from that, just because of mineral content. Even this morning I was reading an article about, because pesticides cause plants to create synthetic nitrogen, it actually, to synthesize that properly, it creates more sugar and starch. So that can diminish the content of antioxidants. So certified organic produce doesn't have to do that. Therefore, because they don't have to synthesize the pesticides and the herbicides in the same way, so their like phenol, polyphenol content is higher, antioxidants, which helps fight disease. So just knowing that the certified organic produce that we're talking about could enhance your nutritional profile each day is bonus.
Like Heather said, right? Like if you're investing a little bit more now, you're likely saving a little bit down the road in terms of, like, you know, if you're boosting your immune system or just being more supportive of your body, you may not run into as many health conditions down the road. Or if you do, your body's better equipped to deal with those. So investing maybe a little bit more now in hopes that you're not having to, like you said, invest in supplements or medications later on down the road, or, you know, just having to take time off work and that kind of thing as well.
I think another good point Sarah was talking about, you know, even just the quality and flavor and taste and things like that. Like I know right now one of the big things we've got going on is palm oil supplementations for our cows and for our dairy cow, just to increase the milk supply. So when you think about that, like it wasn't even brought to anyone's attention that they're changing this up and they're starting to supplement. It was brought to light when they started to realize that the product itself was different, and people weren't enjoying the fact that this conventional product had this palm oil and it was changing the effect of their butter and things like that. So when you get to organic, the certification practices are so restrictive that those kind of things don't happen. So you're always got consistency and you know what to expect every single time too. And there's not going to be any changes like that where it's just, oh yes, we've added a supplement or we're trying something different with this antibiotic for this animal, because it's all transparent. It's very clear with the standards.
Yeah. Right down to like what cleaning products they're using for their facilities and everything, right? I think that's so valuable. And like I said before, it just really feels good to be able to feel really good about what you've purchased, and that vote that you've made with your dollar, and then what you're putting into your body.
Yes, amazing points there, ladies. Thank you so much for diving in and talking about those specific reasons as to why you choose to buy certified organic foods. I just want to give you guys a quick recap as to the benefits of choosing certified organic foods. Not only will you be consuming less pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, antibiotics, and hormones, you will also be supporting organic farmers to farm in a way which is more sustainable for our ecosystem, that doesn't impact our soil in a negative way for future farming practices. And lastly, by choosing certified organic foods, you are also eliminating the exposure to genetically modified foods in your diet, which is actually the certification that I want to dive into next. Non-GMO project verification. So Rebecca, can you start by diving into that a little bit deeper for our listeners?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is a lot of the times what we're doing with genetic modification is altering these seeds so that they can withstand more pesticide application. A small note I want to make is this is not to villainize conventional farmers by any means. Most farms here in Ontario are family-owned farms, and these people are trying to make a living, and a lot of these farms too are working towards having more sort of biodiverse crops and making those changes. But the reason that we're talking specifically about certified organic is because you don't know what the farm beside you is doing, and this organic certification just confirms that. But yeah, again, not to villainize this, because the goal is more yield, right? Because they want to bring they want to support their family and their community. So just not to villainize that, but just knowing that we can really trust this certification. Anyways, back to genetic modification. The reason that they're altering these seeds to withstand more pesticide application is for that higher yield. And one of the products that is very often used is called glyphosate or Roundup. And this is a weed killer, and this has been really heavily linked to things like ADHD, autism, cancers, mood disorders, and celiac specifically. It can really alter our gut biome and create things like leaky gut, where these little tight junctions in your gut are separating and allowing things that wouldn't normally be allowed into your blood. So that is what I understand about genetic modification, but there may be more to that.
Well, as far as I understood, the reason why it all came about was actually to produce crops and food for third world countries. And that's how it originally started, was that the seeds needed to be able to withstand the soil as well as withstand the chemicals in order to be able to be produced in these areas that they're foreign to. So that was the original intention behind it to start. However, what happened was it became profitable, and it became profitable to transfer that into the regular conventional farming that we see every day with our agriculture, and we quickly learned that it's not beneficial. So because it became overabundance with us, what we started to see is things like our bee population started to be affected, our animals and our birds and things like that, our insects, all of that kind of stuff, our diversity, our environment started to become impacted because we didn't really necessarily do a whole lot of research on it and look at the facts as to what potentially could be the harm and how this affects everything as a whole. So the purpose, like I said at the beginning, was to have the intention of providing more food, and still is to create more of a yield, but it came down to the benefit of profit, and that's where it kind of leaked out that it's not so much for us, right? Because if that was the case, then we would be taking into consideration these aspects of, you know, how it's affecting our health and the environment and things like that. But yeah, it's just not the case right now.
And another thing too about in Canada, labels do not have to specify if GMOs are used. So the only way you could truly know is if it is certified organic, or there is the non-GMO verification project, but it still has to be verified. For a product to just say it's non-GMO does not mean that it's verified non-GMO. A company very well could be not using genetically modified ingredients, but without the verification, it isn't necessarily a guarantee, because in Canada you don't have to label if you use genetically modified ingredients.
Now, if something is certified organic, does that automatically mean it's non-GMO?
Yes.
Yeah.
Certified organic is essentially the gold standard. I think most food that is not genetically modified would have that certification on it. I see a lot of a lot of kids, like granola bars and things like that, that's becoming a certification you see a lot on there. And you should be questioning if your product doesn't have that on there. Are you consuming genetically modified food, and are you aware that that really isn't food at this point? They've altered it so much that the body doesn't recognize that as food and as nutrients as well as it would if it was a non-genetically modified crop.
And because it became so profitable, as Heather pointed out, it went well past just being able to withstand chemicals or travel. It was, so these tomatoes look redder, or something as small as color, which really doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things, but to the look of the consumer. So it really did get, for some companies, out of hand to the point where it wasn't necessarily necessary to do that, which is a little bit disturbing, really, and something for us to be mindful. We're in an age where we are inundated with information, and we have the ability as consumers to educate ourselves in all that we're buying. So this is really just an empowerment piece, really, to encourage everyone to really know what they're buying, the foods they're buying, where they're coming from, what's in the labels. I mean, label reading has become such a big thing now, and like the controversy with the supplementation that contains the palm oil, people are just becoming more and more aware of what's in their food, where it's coming from, and that's amazing. That's excellent to see.
And I think going back to, just like we said, these third-party certifications, anybody can type non-GMO on their label or organic on their label, but looking for those proper seals, right? Like the non-GMO project verification, and then the Canada Organic or USDA Organic seals looking at those versus, you know, if something just says organic, it may be, but has a third party come to inspect their facilities, and is that something that you can really trust, or is somebody just saying, I'm pretty sure it's mostly organic?
Yeah, exactly. And for our listeners, in case you aren't registering what non-GMO product verification seal is, what that one is the rectangle with the blue on the background, the orange butterfly, and that green leaf piece as well. And I just want to let you guys know that genetically modified organisms, which is what GMO stands for, can be plant, animal, or microorganisms, which genetic modification has happened in a laboratory to change its genetic makeup. As we talked about, there are many reasons as to why they do this, but some genetically modified foods that we can say off the top of our head, if they're not certified organic, would be canola, corn, soy, papaya, sugar beet, squashes, zucchini, different types of lentils, and different animal byproducts as well. Okay, so we talked about certified organic, we've talked about non-GMO verified. The next thing I want to talk about for products that you're going to see a lot more of, and you're already seeing them in our store, is certified fair trade products. So in store, you're going to see this certification start to be more on different products, and off the top of my head, where you'd already see them would be bananas, chocolate, coffee, and some teas. And this certification, a lot of people actually are not aware of, and I think it's one of the most important certifications because it factors in humans. And that is one other thing that people do not discuss when it comes to organic produce as much, whereas fair trade is another certification that's really, really important. So who wants to tell our listeners what certified fair trade products mean?
Well, considering I've got all the eyes on the rooms on me, I will start. Fair trade actually is one of my favorite certifications out there. Like Marissa says, it involves the wellness and well-being of humans themselves. So one of the things that we don't necessarily think about as consumers is we see things on the shelf, right? So we see our cheese, we see our coffee, we see whatever the product is, but we don't necessarily see the steps and the ethics that go into actually making that product. So with fair trade, certified fair trade, what that means is all the workers on there are actually being treated ethically and fair. So that means that the work that they're putting in, the regular hours that they're working, they're getting a fair wage for, and the conditions that they're working in are also sustainable, ethical, and nice. Where you can look at certain farmers that don't have that kind of standard, and you've got almost like labor camp style when it comes to work, right? So you're working for very, very little wage, extremely long hours, and again, it takes into the community as well. So where these fair trade certifications usually start for are in places internationally that have products that we don't grow here or carry here, like for coffee, for example. So it just ensures that those products, even though they're made a distance away, that the people there are being taken care of. And so no one's suffering for what we get to enjoy, because I think any type of product that we consume should be, as harm-free and kind as possible, realistically, for ourselves and our environment. And thinking about other people and not just about ourselves is really important too when it comes to this certification. So this is definitely one of my favorite, and I'm so glad over the last, I'd say probably 3 or 4 years, that it's really become more known and people are understanding what it means to be fair trade, and that's important.
Absolutely. And it's like, it started for me personally with coffee. It's like, everyone knows I love coffee, and I could not sit and have a cup of coffee and think to myself, what had to happen in order for these beans to get here, and who had to, it sounds like bad, but essentially suffer in order for me to enjoy this cup of coffee. And I don't think as consumers we are even thinking that far back in terms of the production of our products, and we should be. So at Joanne's Place, obviously, that is like one of the bottom line things that we have in terms of our coffee, is we want it to be fair trade. There's a few exceptions in terms of local, but most of our coffee is fair trade because it's something that we stand behind and believe in. And there's also other products like our chocolate, bananas, like I said. What other products do we have that are fair trade?
Sugar would be another industry that would be important to be mindful of, the fair trade options.
Even things like nuts and cashews. Like I look at cashews, and something that's like, we look at as our luxury nut, right? But for the process of how those are actually collected, the outside shell of a cashew is actually highly toxic, and it creates almost like a poison ivy kind of reaction. And without having certifications and standards for fair trade, people are just going in there and picking them and getting those burns and just living with that as their lifestyle, because there's nothing to stop it from corporations saying that that's not acceptable. So with things like fair trade, you're ensuring that someone's not going home with burns on their hands at the end of the night, and they're sleeping well. So yeah.
Absolutely. So as we mentioned, there's obviously a lot of areas that we can look at in our lifestyle in terms of where we spend our money, the ingredients that we invest in, the companies that we support, and the initiatives that these companies are ensuring for the quality and the well-being of the people who are working to harvest these ingredients. So there's lots of things to consider, but what you can do is just start by reading and educating yourself on what you already have in your home. So check your coffee, start there. See if it is certified organic or if it is certified fair trade. And then maybe the next time you are replenishing your coffee, you are looking for an alternative that does have that certification on your coffee product. Maybe then you move on to nuts and seeds or coconut, your types of sugars that you're consuming, and just see what small changes that you can make in your lifestyle that are sustainable and can fit within your budget. The one other certification that we want to share with you guys today is B-Corp certification. And we love B-Corp certification because we work in the industry where B-Corp certification matters. So Rebecca, can you read exactly what B-Corp certification means when a company puts that on their product or promotes their company as a B-Corp certification?
This one I also really love. I think it's a lot when you're looking at, okay, I want my food to be not genetically modified, I want it to be organic, I want it to be fair trade, and there's a lot to look at there. But again, it just comes down to voting with your dollar, voting for future generations, and voting for the people who worked so hard to get that food on your plate, because that's something I think we miss a lot is we don't think a lot about how the food got to be right in front of us. And I think B Corp does a really, really neat job of this. So I'm just going to read from their website. They have their declaration of interdependence, which I think is really neat. And as B corporations and leaders of the emerging economy, they believe they must be the change we seek in the world. All businesses ought to be conducted as if people and place mattered. That through their products, practices, and profits, business should aspire to do no harm and benefit all. And to do so requires that we act with the understanding that we are each dependent upon another and thus responsible for each other and future generations. So this certified B Corporation looks at a lot of these different aspects of a business and certifies that they have looked at these things, and you can be sure that the product that is in front of you has taken all of these things into account.
Yeah, and with the B Corp certification too, it's often the overarching organization that will be certified B Corp. So you will see products that have the B and the circle on it, but if you really want to know for sure, you could access the company information, because that may not always be present on products, even though the organization as a whole is a B Corp certified corporation, and we are seeing more and more of that emerge, which is excellent.
You're seeing that a lot on supplements lately, which is fantastic, because a lot of people don't even think about the raw materials that go into making multivitamins and protein powders and things like that. But when a company is formulating their products and they are a B Corporated certification, they are taking into consideration those raw materials, where they're getting them from, also how they treat their staff. And we know, I think in the last year, a lot of companies have become very eye-opening in how they've treated their staff and respected their staff, and that's a whole other piece. And there's many certifications that we could go down and talk about, but those are the main ones that we wanted to talk about today. Was certified organic, certified non-GMO, certified fair trade, and B Corporation. So as we said earlier, if the food that you are consuming or the products that you are consuming do not hit this criteria, don't panic, because that's exactly what happens. Is everyone wants to clean out all their cupboards and get rid of everything they have, but let's keep in mind that we still want to keep this as a sustainable transition, which means you need to use up the products you already have. That's part of being sustainable, is finishing what you already have, and then being mindful in terms of where your next dollar is spent. Is it more of your budget going more towards certified organic produce or certified organic meat? Is it maybe when you're looking at the granola bars for your children, you're choosing maybe the Made Good brand that has more certifications on their products versus Nature's Valley? And as we said, these big companies out there like Nature's Valley and Kellogg's, Minute Maid, things like that, they are watching us. They are watching where the money is being spent, and we know that because we're already seeing these big corporations make other products. An example here would be like Pepsi and cola. They have made now a Pepsi and cola product using stevia instead of cane sugar or white sugar, which we still aren't promoting those products because there's other ingredients in there, but we know that they're watching and that they want to stay up to date with the trends because they want you to keep buying their products. Essentially, we want to support the companies that are already doing these practices and they're already, created based on this foundation of certified organic, non-GMO, all of those things. But we also want to keep in mind that there is still a financial burden for some people, and not even some, most people. There's still a financial burden for most people in terms of how quickly they can make this transition from conventional to organic products.
And I would say too that one of the big things, if you're going to make the switch and wanting to kind of transition, is taking a look at what you already purchase and what you normally consume and switch those out. But if you're looking at your cupboards and you've got regular mac and cheeses, or you've got a bunch of frozen meals in your freezer, take a look at what you could possibly do to make those yourself, because starting to create your own kind of meals and freezing them ahead of time and meal prep and things like that, you're actually going to save yourself some more money. Because if you're trying to switch organic mac and cheese to your regular craft dinner, you're going to see an astronomical amount in price. But if you were to take organic ingredients to make your own mac and cheese, break it into a batch, and you've got a couple to put in the freezer, it's not going to be as expensive as you might think. So just play with it and try it and experiment and see where it goes.
Yeah.
This is a great time to do that. As we know, a large percentage of the population during the pandemic did switch their dollars from perhaps takeout or ordering out to cooking from home. I mean, this is the time to try some of these things, because a lot of you may have already made that switch, already may have tried cooking things from home when maybe you didn't before. For sure that does help with cost.
And I think one of the big barriers to this can be time, and I'm going to put Sarah a little bit on the spot for this. As a mom, how do you deal with that? Deal with the time that it takes to make these things from home? Are you involving your kids in the process? Like, how does that work?
So for me, I find that having a plan is the most important thing. And I know that there's lots of mothers out there, or whether you have children or not, everybody says I'm busy. Everyone's busy, and that's the fact. Everybody is busy. And I think that we have an opportunity to take a moment to just pause and really look at what we value and what's important to us. So if being more healthy and wanting to make some of these changes we've talked about is a priority to you, then there needs to be a time shift in spending and planning what you're going to do. So in our household, I have a 7-day meal plan. It's on the fridge. My kids know what we're having for dinner every day. Some parents don't like that because then it gives their kids opportunity to complain. But that helps me decide what I need to buy and what I don't based on what I already have in the house. So for sure, meal planning absolutely in our household is priority, because that allows me to put a name to every dollar, basically, when it comes to the food in our household. And honestly, we eat very simply. That as someone who works 40 hours a week, both me and my husband are working outside of the home primarily, so I don't have time to take 2 hours to make dinner. Sometimes, but I love cooking, I love food, but I'll save more complex meals for the weekends. And that's something that if I'm going to experiment and try something new, it would be on a weekend. I mean, or days you don't work. I don't work on the weekend, so I have that opportunity. But I think planning and researching recipes that are simple are a great way to start, because yes, you're busy, time is valuable, you're tired when you come home. But I think for me, as a mother, it's very important to me that my time goes to ensuring my children's future, and part of that would be the food that goes in their mouths. So I do have a 13-year-old daughter, so she definitely is more involved in what we make. She asks more questions and wants to know stuff. My other one is who's 10. She's not so much yet, but because we do eat simply, I'm able to get them to do some things. Or I said to Bailey next year when she starts high school that there needs to be one meal she can make on her own, right? So some of the things that involving your children, having them help you, is a great way to teach them why the food they're consuming is important. We talk about that a lot, and how it can, help you as a maybe tired parent.
I think we really get caught up in perfectionism, especially if you're looking at social media. So just back to what Marissa said, what little changes can you make one step at a time, right? Creating these sustainable habits, because it can be very overwhelming. So yeah, just one thing at a time.
Yeah, to wrap this up in this episode, because we have a whole series on what we're talking about in terms of eating more certified organic or local sustainable products and what that actually looks like. But like I said at the beginning, there's no guilt and there's no pressure if you're not doing it. There's no right way to do it. Let's just stay there. Everyone is on their own path. Everyone has their own priorities. What it comes down to is, where you're either spending your money, where you're spending your time, also investing in the products that you're looking at or preparing and things like that. So start small. If anything, really, if you're listening to this podcast now, all I ask of you is to start looking at the ingredients that you already have in your house. What are the ingredients that you use either every day or multiple times a week? And ask yourself, is this being a hindrance to my health or is it supporting it? And if it is, impacting your health, what's the next step that you can change it? Just start with those products that you use often, and then just be more mindful. You might see, and I see this myself, is organic goes on sale. It gets discounted. We have different sales that run at the store as well on different produce. So just be mindful of what's on sale, where you can save money, and how you can make this transition a little bit easier for yourself. And like I said, we're going to leave in the comments the Dirty Dozen and Clean 15. And if you're looking at those lists, just focus on the Dirty Dozen. So only buy the organic produce that you're putting into your budget off that list. Don't worry about anything that's on the Clean 15. And then start with your meat as well too. So start small, don't panic, because it can be overwhelming. And we know that because there's a lot of information out there. But for this episode, we wanted to bring you the information and the facts, and then also help to inspire you to make this transition to live more of a certified organic or non-GMO, fair trade lifestyle. And that wraps up our first episode of the Sustainability series. Please join us here next week for part 2, where we will be discussing how going beyond organic and choosing sustainability might be the better option. You guys know what to do here. Please subscribe to our channel so that you do not miss any notifications as soon as a new episode is released. Please give us any comments below on your transition from conventional to organic foods, and be sure to share on social media that you're listening to the Wellness on Purpose